Welcome back, everybody, to What Really Matters. I'm Tablet Deputy Editor Jeremy Stern with you in Los Angeles. I'm here, as always, with Walter Russell Mead, Tablet news writer, Global View columnist at The Wall Street Journal, and distinguished fellow at Hudson. Let's start with this week's news, and what a week it's been. First story of the week. Donald Trump's selection of J.D. Vance as his running mate has cemented Europe's fears that a second Trump term would drastically reduce transatlantic security ties, increase tariffs, and sever critical U.S. support for Ukraine, according to the Financial Times. Vance has dismissed U.S. security guarantees as a crutch that has allowed Europe to, quote, ignore its own security, and argued the U.S. aid for Ukraine is unnecessary. Trump's choice of the 39-year-old has intensified U.S. allies' concerns that he intends to run a protectionist America First administration with huge implications for Europe's defense and economic security. Walter, news or faux news?
Well, certainly the pick was news, and the worries of the Europeans about it were news. Although honestly, I don't think that this didn't tell them anything about Donald Trump they shouldn't have known from before. And I do think they're getting a little bit overwrought in the sense that it's kind of clear what Trump is looking for in the Middle East, in the Far East, and in Europe. He wants allies who are at least as concerned about their own security as the United States is. And he wants to see, he doesn't see why should the United States, say with a country like Germany, say, oh, have a little bit more security for grandma, like, why is it America's job to tell Germans to care about German security? They're certainly rich enough to do so. And if they're not concerned about it, well, then why should we be? Maybe they're fine and we should just kind of let them go. Obviously, take any attitude too far, but it is absolutely clear, and I think you'd find a lot of people on the Democratic side would say the same thing, that the situation of the world today, including the threats that we face in the Indo-Pacific, is such that the United States simply can't go on being Europe's sugar daddy when it comes to something like NATO. Now, you can say that someone like me who believes that NATO is a genuinely important alliance, that it is in America's interest to support, or you can say that if you're somebody who doesn't care much about NATO either way. But unless Europe really steps up to the plate, NATO will wither away, either because the United States loses interest politically and the politics to support it aren't there, or simply because NATO keeps getting weaker and weaker and the world keeps getting more dangerous, and NATO is no longer an effective security alliance. That's what we have been drifting toward. It would be very, very nice to see a change, but really that change does need to come from Europe. So I would say if the Europeans are scared, if the specter of a Vance vice presidency is sort of scaring the Europeans into taking security more seriously, it's maybe not a bad thing.
What do you make of Vance as Trump's pick more generally? On the one hand, it seems that of all the candidates we'd heard about, like Burgum and Youngkin and others, that Vance was maybe the most kind of right-wing or MAGA pick. On the other hand, in practice in the Senate, he's been notable for co-sponsoring bills with Democrats to lower drug prices, scale back executive pay, fight corporate mergers. I think he even said in an interview that the people he sympathizes with most on economic policy are the Bernie bros. So what do you make of Vance?
Well, I think he's a skilled politician who has read the public mood. Vance, for all of the populism, Vance is not demonstrably all that popular with voters. That is to say, the last time when he ran for the Senate in Ohio, he did not outperform the ticket generally, and he really needed some emergency help to get over the line. So on the one hand, he's a symbol of a new kind of politics and brings a lot of excitement to the ticket. On the other hand, it's not clear that he brings a strong political base of his own, say the way that Mike Pence did with evangelicals. So what's the message here? One of the messages, I don't think Trump thinks he needs much help this time. He's not looking to expand his base. He's not saying I could lose this thing unless I find the right vice president. He's not saying that. He's also, I think, it's a pretty definite display of dominance over other people and other tendencies in the Republican Party. There's not It's not a concession where a Nikki Haley or a Glenn Youngkin or someone is sort of brought in who, quote, moderate Republicans can say, well, we're still a factor. This is a Trump plus double Trump ticket. You hear a lot of people talking about Vance as Trump's heir and securing the succession. Honestly, if I were Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, I would not want people talking that way about me. I think of the moment in the Bible where the crowd begins to chant, Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands. From that moment, David's star began to fall with Saul, and that was what mattered. It's a dangerous thing to be close to Donald Trump because for Trump, he doesn't want a potential successor stealing the limelight, stealing power. And so I think we can expect that for Vance, it's going to be a bit of a rocky road being Trump's number two.
All right, our second story. Donald Trump has said Taiwan should pay the U.S. for its defense guarantees, a statement that sent shudders through the island nation and highlighted the stakes of the upcoming presidential election for Washington's allies and partners in Asia. Shares of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's largest chip maker by sales, dropped 2.4% after Trump said in an interview with Bloomberg that Taiwan, quote, stole our chip business and should pay the U.S. for defense, referring to the implicit security guarantee provided by the American military. Taiwan buys almost all of its weapons through government-negotiated foreign military sales from the U.S., making it one of the largest markets for American defense companies. Walter, news or faux news?
Again, it's not a surprise. This is how Trump thinks of international relations. Anybody who followed his dealings with South Korea in the first term would know that this is even a country like Japan with whom he got along very well. And this does reflect Trump's basic idea. Again, is like, why am I paying double for your security? You surely should be the prime. You should be taking more responsibility for your own security than I am, and I should be there as a supplement and a secondary insurer, not offering your primary coverage, so to speak. And it forces Taiwan toward a decision point, which may be one reason other presidents haven't wanted to do this. It makes the prospect of conflict with China more real to the Taiwanese, asking them to pay X toward their own security is not necessarily something that is a popular move there. Might increase the number of people in Taiwan who think, well, maybe the smart thing to do is reach an accommodation with China. I think if people on the island respond creatively and intelligently and working with countries like Japan, which is deeply concerned with this issue as well, I think they can find a way that brings Taiwan into Trump's better graces. And we have to remember with Trump that part of his method of negotiation, which runs very, very counter to what other Western and other diplomats have done, is he'll try to unsettle you by putting worst case scenarios out on the table, big demands out on the table, because he wants to move the whole thing in his direction. He doesn't necessarily he doesn't expect to get 100% of what he asks for when he puts these demands down on the table, but he certainly is doing it because he wants to move things in his direction. So it's sort of up to the Taiwanese to decide for themselves, How important is U.S. protection to them? What can and should they do to make sure that they stay under the umbrella? It's up to some of Taiwan's friends like Japan and the Philippines to think about how do we help make this work. But the reality in American politics is that we do need to find ways to strengthen our alliances, not simply in the sense of strengthening America's commitment to our alliances. We want to strengthen our allies' commitment to the alliances. Now, you can argue that Trump's method of threats and blackmail may, in fact, weaken that commitment, and there are perfectly logical reasons why people might vote against Trump in November, come November. But I think we should not sort of see this as some kind of representing some fundamental disinclination on his part to defend Taiwan. Though, suppose China makes him an attractive offer. Trump likes to keep everything open, and that is very unsettling for people used to very different kinds of diplomacy.
All right, final story of the week. The presidential debate on June 27th, and especially the attempted assassination of Trump on Saturday, has prompted a preference cascade in Silicon Valley and Wall Street, enabling high-profile figures to violate the taboo against supporting Trump and publicly declare their endorsements. In 2016, the Silicon Valley titan Mark Andreessen, who supported Hillary Clinton, said there were literally only two figures in all of tech, Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey, who supported Trump. But as of this week, Trump supporters now also include Andreessen himself, Elon Musk, Ben Horowitz, Bill Ackman, David Sachs, Joe Lonsdale, and others. Andreessen and Horowitz this week cited in particular Biden's attempts to crush competition in the nascent blockchain and AI industries with administrative and regulatory burdens, and also Biden's recent proposal to levy a minimum 25% annual tax on unrealized capital gains as the final straw for them. Walter, news or faux news?
News. It is clear that Silicon Valley is, which is, the most dynamic sector and probably most vital from a national security standpoint sector of our economy, is kind of rebelling against the Biden administration. We should be, again, a little cautious here, or rather, let me just say this: populism is an interesting thing. What we're hearing is a lot of, J.D. Vance talking this way, the Teamsters Union president who was at the Republican convention, talking a lot about unions and working people and fair shares. One of the interesting things about a lot of these tech companies is they don't have a lot of working people there. So it may well be that for some of these folks, if you're building robo-taxis, you're not as worried about a taxi drivers union as some other people might be. In fact, you might even think, well, if people are raising wages for factory workers and so on, that's actually going to be a much greater market for the kind of tech-enabled automation. Sometimes, by the way, I think that measures to raise the minimum wage should be known as Silicon Valley Support Acts, because they actually do hasten and subsidize, essentially, the movement toward automation, replacement of human workers with robots or what have you. So I think, raising, and also these companies depend much, much less on imported goods and supply chain, so that tariffs don't actually touch them very much. And there's a sense in which J.D. Vance can kind of rant about tariffs, and Trump can talk about tariffs and barriers and all of these things. Let 1,000 unions bloom, and maybe it's just fine with some of these tech people. So we should, they might say, well, labor unions, that's a Jeff Bezos problem. That's an Amazon problem. It's not an Anduril problem.
How, with Trump himself, how did he go from the kind of backwards-looking, angry candidate of 2016 looking to make America great again to at least the perceived candidate of the future, or the candidate of crypto and AI and tech, while his opponents are now the party of like rent control and so forth?
Yeah, well, part of it is that since the debate performance, I think the Biden camp seems to be looking to really reach out to the left. Um, try to block these moves to throw Biden off the ticket, or rather to, try to fool the befuddled old man by talking about what a great president is. There, Grandpa. Yeah, everybody loves you, Grandpa. Now give me the car keys, Grandpa. Please give me the car keys. And by the way, Grandpa, what's the number to your checking account? And here's a little power of attorney we'd like you to sign. You're the greatest, Grandpa. You really are. Okay. I'm not sure that Biden is quite senile enough to be impressed by this act. But as he is trying to forestall the defenestration, he's reaching out to the left. He's offering, 100-day progressive cascade, going to cancel debt for medical bills. That'll go over really well with people who paid their medical bills, I suspect. Rent control, national rent control. I don't think there's any policy that there's more evidence for that is a bad policy than rent control. What could possibly go wrong with doing that on a national scale? So these kinds of things, but they weren't really part of an articulated overall campaign strategy. They're rabbits he's pulling out of the hat in this effort to stay in office. But what that does is it does have the effect. Trump of the two is now the much freer candidate since he controls his party. Biden is fighting for his life in his party. And so Trump is is already able to start the process of whatever general election strategy is in his mind. Trump is able to execute, while Biden is still in that sort of place you are as a primary contender when you're trying to sort of curry enough favor with different factions in your party, regardless of what impact this may have on your November chances. It's a bad position for an incumbent president to be in, and normally it's not the place where an incumbent finds himself. So Biden, this is a tough moment for President Biden.
All right, that does it for the news this week. Let's have the big conversation. So this is the first time we've spoken, Walter, since the attempt on Donald Trump's life Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania. There's so much here, from the instinctive physical courage Trump displayed, the iconic photographs, the apparent contrast they provided to Biden's decline, the insane incompetence of the Secret Service, the decision not to fire anyone or demand resignations, and also this strange double effect the assassination attempt has had on both kind of cementing Biden as the Democratic candidate, at least for the moment, but also cementing the perceived hopelessness of his campaign. There's just so many different ways we can approach this, but I guess let's start with your own experience of hearing about it and seeing the footage and the photos after it happened on Saturday, and what you were thinking and going through personally, and then also where you place it in the annals of American political history.
It was a big moment. I was actually kind of at a gathering with friends, and we were doing other things and sort of didn't know till right away what was going on. But in this age, someone sooner or later popped out a cell phone, and there we were sitting by a very lovely lake in upstate New York, and no longer talking about any of the things you would normally talk about at a lovely upstate New York lakeside retreat, and going on and on about what was happening, what wasn't happening. And of course, the news comes out slowly and bit by bit. And so you're trying to find out what happened. I have to say, I've lived through a lot of these moments. I remember quite well how I heard about JFK's assassination. The attempts on Ford, the attempt on Reagan, and of course, many shocking events in world politics. After a while, you do sort of lose your ability to be shocked. It takes more and more to shock you. And I have worried for some time. You look at just how intense the polarization is, you look at this trend toward so many young men being kind of anchorless and not having community relations, living in a sort of fantasy world of video games, pornography, and goodness knows what else. And in that kind of situation, it sort of breeds potential assassins. So it was not the biggest surprise of my life to find that someone would try to kill President Trump. It was a bit of a shock to see just how poorly these systems work. If you live in Washington, D.C., a lot of your life is impacted by the Secret Service closing things down. You get a sense that they're kind of, if anything, too focused on security, and everything is extremely difficult. I remember years ago, when Clinton was president, I attended a state dinner in the White House, and you had to give in all of this information about yourself days in advance, and then you went through a rather significant screening to get in. And I was thinking to myself, if I thought there was even the slightest chance somebody out there was trying to kill me, I just wouldn't invite him to dinner. If I thought there was even the teeniest, tiniest chance that they were trying to kill me, they just would not be on my guest list. So I had this kind of sense of super zealousness on the part of the Secret Service. But finding out actually how slapdash some of it is, and really no one expects, anybody to be able to deal with something as complex as a sloped roof. I mean, that of course is, that's ridiculous. But I guess the sort of lack of communication between the local police and the Secret Service. Okay, from one side of point of view, for every local police department is different. Every different procedures and so on. And the Secret Service hasn't necessarily worked with the Butler police all that often, right? But on the other hand, one of its core functions is to be in these places where there's inevitably a certain amount of divided responsibility between local authorities and the Secret Service. And the fact that it seems as if this interface just was working so poorly, that doesn't seem like a one-time, one-day problem. That seems like a fairly profound, almost like, in 911, people discovered the FBI and the CIA really weren't talking to each other very much, and this created a real gap. Well, this looks a little bit similar, and you do wonder what all those people drawing very significant salaries and having very exalted titles, working on this stuff for so many years, how come this little thing slipped through the cracks? I'm not a person who I think, if anything, in our society, we overreact to sudden news. So Biden has a bad debate performance, and the next morning, the entire opinion page of the New York Times is sort of ringing with hysterical calls for him to step down. This does not strike me as a sign of a mature, balanced national leadership class or anything else. It does seem to me that we need to, sometimes you need to wait for more facts to come out. And I would like to see, but I really would like to see in this a real investigation. Why did this happen? And again, not just why did this incident happen the way it did, but what if any, are the real structural problems in the way the Secret Service interfaces with local law enforcement, and how do we change it? And if there is individual responsibility, there should be consequences. So, let's not hang them first and then have a trial. Let's really look into it and then see what is the best way to do it. And obviously, the thing to really be thinking about here is we still have several months before the election, and the disaster. I mean, if former President Trump's head had just moved a little bit, we would be in a very different place today. And that could still happen to any candidate for president in this year. This is, we really do need to The Secret Service needs to be getting better, not worse, and be doing it pretty fast. But in terms of consequences, Jeremy, political consequences, both of the debate and of the assassination. Now, the day, we're talking fairly soon after the assassination attempt, but I'm seeing a huge movement in the polls. The race has been close all year, with Trump mostly a little bit ahead. He gained a point or two after the debate. Some of that bounce he has lost since the debate. Before the assassination attempt, the lead he developed after the debate was actually beginning to diminish, not increase. So I'm not quite. I don't. If I were President Biden sitting there looking at the polls and listening to all of these people screaming at me, "There's no possible way you could win," I would really look at them as if they were crazy, just because the evidence that we can see does not point to a panic situation for President Biden. And if you then imagine, the different outcomes, the possibilities of an open convention or whatever, the chances for damage there are significant. Now, obviously, the people who think he needs to step down are saying, yeah, but you're going to do this again and again, and you can't control when it's going to happen. You don't know when it's happening. Now, this happens like 3 or 4 more times between now and the election, and it's bad. And this, it's a real concern. But why the Democratic Party, why the Democratic establishment was so determined not to have any real primary challengers? So this thing all could have been litigated in the way our politics has provided for it, a serious primary challenge to an incumbent president. They have only themselves to blame for this position that they're in. What is it? Poor old Dean Phillips, trying to raise this issue, was frozen out and hated on, and couldn't get any money, couldn't get any hearing. I hope there are a lot of people saying, "I'm really sorry. I apologize. You were right. I was wrong. You're a hero of the Democratic Party in the United States, and I'm an idiot and a buffoon for not helping you or bringing someone more prominent in to fight that fight." So the Democratic Party basically betrayed its own principles and its voters by freezing out a real primary, has discovered, much to its horror, that it may have made an immense mistake, and is now sort of flopping and floundering around trying to, figure out a path forward. None of this really inspires a lot of confidence, but at the same time, none of it seems to be moving the polls, because most people, between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, even very low information voters, have some idea what these two men are about and which of the two, I won't say prefer, but maybe which of these people they least despise. And so this race, Trump has a floor, Trump has a ceiling, Biden has a floor, Biden has a ceiling. Nothing in the last 10 days seems to have changed that. Now, normally, in a normal election, Trump could expect maybe a bit of a convention bounce. He should certainly expect a bit of a post-assassination attempt bounce. But maybe this year that won't be so great. Again, I just feel that our leadership class, it has lost the sort of emotional stability, gravitas, patience, willingness to think first and reflect first. So the people who should be bringing some kind of calm and perspective to the situation often seem to be the people running around with their hair on fire. That's not healthy. The rest of the country, the average voter is perfectly able to set their hair on fire and run around screaming, but you want to be able to look to the people who put themselves forward as leaders, and find people who are taking a higher path. We're not seeing that. And that is, in a way, as worrying as anything we're seeing from either of the two candidates. Maybe more worrying because it could be a longer term problem.
All right, that does it for the big conversation. Let's end on the tip of the week. Another reader request this week, Walter, this time from Bud in Virginia, who wants to know, what's your favorite beach in the world?
I thought a lot about that, Jeremy, that request. And I'm not going to tell you because there is a beach that I adore. And I actually don't want any more people coming to that beach than are already there. So, wild horses could not pull that secret out of me. I'll say this, it's a beach in south of the Mason-Dixon line on the Atlantic seaboard, and my family's been going there for almost 100 years in various forms, and we like it, and we don't really think it needs a lot of other people. I had some relatives, at least by marriage, were Confederate soldiers who were sent down there during the war to protect it from the Yankees. And to some degree, I think we're as a family, we're still trying to protect it from the outsiders. But that said, I'll say some things about what makes a good beach. And in my mind, there are basically two kinds of good beaches. One is a non-snorkeling, non-coral beach. And what makes that, what you really want there is you want something like you'll find from the Chesapeake on down on the east coast of the US, which is a front beach with a lot of sand, a lot of nice surf coming in, maybe some shells, and then a back beach, which is a tidal marsh where you can go crabbing or shrimping or other things like that. That's a really nice beach, and you have a variety of activities, and you see a sunrise over the water and a sunset over the marsh. That's one kind of good beach. And the other kind is on a nice tropical island somewhere where the water is crystal clear, and it's white sand, and you can kind of waddle down in your snorkel fins, your swimming fins, and jump in the water and paddle off and see sea turtles and octopuses and various other fine creatures of the deep. That's another kind of great beach. They're very different. As far as I know, there's really no place where you can see the two of them together. It's pretty much an either or kind of thing, because the surf pounding on the sand clouds the water. If somebody knows of a place that you can have both, they can let me know, and I promise I won't tell anybody else about it. I'll just quietly go myself.
All right, there you have it. Thanks to our producer, Noam Bloom. Thanks to Will Cummings at Hudson and my co-host, Walter Russell Mead. I'm Jeremy Stern. We'll see you next week. And until then, please go rate and review us. This helps other people find the show.